I've been working so hard for so long. I just want to know what true joy feels like.
On the surface, Valerie Bertinelli exudes joy. For years, her bright smile has been lighting up the screen.
Valerie Bertinelli was once the girl next door that America couldn't stop watching.
You know, I did 9 seasons of One Day at a Time, so most of you out there probably know me as sweet little Barbara Cooper, the girl next door.
But behind the smile, something quietly changed. Fans who grew up with her are now wondering what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling.
Valerie, what's up, Tom? How you doing?
For someone who seemed to have it all, her recent struggles have raised eyebrows and touched hearts. Whispers about her personal battles.
I'm going through a lot of challenges, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of crazy stuff is going on in my life right now.
Have started to surface again, and people want to know the truth. Is this just another chapter of heartbreak or something even deeper? Join us as we explore what really happened to Valerie Bertinelli.
Love always wins, no matter what. Even when they're gone, there's still that love there.
The secret struggles behind the smile. Valerie was only 15 when she first walked onto the set of One Day at a Time. To everyone watching the sitcom, the young American actress was cheerful, funny, and sweet. She looked like the kind of girl who had everything going for her. But when the lights went off and the crowds disappeared, she was someone else entirely. She was just a teenager, quietly falling apart, even when no one noticed. Years later, she told the truth on the Drew Barrymore show. She had walked straight to Bonnie Franklin, her on-screen mom, and told her she couldn't hold it together anymore. "I'm struggling," she said. This time around, it wasn't drama, it was real. And instead of brushing her off, Bonnie listened, understood, and sent Valerie to therapy. The story behind what really happened to Valerie is just sad. The truth will leave you stunned. Keep watching. What Valerie said that day didn't just come out of nowhere. It came from years of pain that nobody saw. Something inside her had always been unsettled. Something that started long before she became famous. It started years earlier, in a house where silence spoke louder than words. Valerie was born into a Catholic Italian family. She was the only daughter in a house full of boys. Her parents, Nancy and Andrew Bertinelli, held their values close. There was structure, tradition, and a deep sense of right and wrong. Her mother took care of the home. Her father worked hard as a General Motors executive. The family moved a lot. From Delaware to Michigan, Louisiana, and eventually California, they never stayed in one place long enough to settle. Valerie always felt like she was trying to catch up, trying to belong wherever they landed next. But even before she could understand what grief meant, she was living inside of it. Her older brother, Mark, had died of accidental poisoning when he was just 17 months old. Valerie was born shortly after. The loss wasn't just part of family history, it was everywhere, in the quiet moments, in the way her mother looked at her sometimes, in the heaviness her father carried on his shoulders. Valerie wasn't replacing Mark, but sometimes it felt like she was supposed to heal something she didn't break. She grew up wanting to be enough, not perfect, just enough. Enough to lift her mother's sadness, enough to make her father smile, enough to stop the aching silence that sometimes filled their home. That pressure wasn't spoken, but it was there in every corner, and little by little, it shaped who she became. The world saw her as this bright, lovable teenager who lit up the screen. But she was just a girl, trying to find something to hold on to. She had spent most of her childhood moving from city to city, never planting roots, never quite feeling settled. By the time the family landed in California, Valerie was 13. Her world was already full of emotional undercurrents. But something shifted, but soon it turned into something else. Acting became a way to express the things she couldn't say out loud. It started small, a commercial here and there. Nothing flashy, just enough to get a feel for it. But she had something. It was raw, honest, and completely natural. A casting director noticed. Then, everything changed. She landed the role of Barbara Cooper on One Day at a Time when she was only 15. Almost overnight, She went from being a teenager with insecurities to a national star. People were tuning in every week to see her smile, laugh, and deliver one-liners like she had been doing it all her life. The fame was sudden, and for everyone watching, it looked like she was made for it. But inside, Valerie was crumbling. She showed up to set with her lines memorized and her game face on. The moment the director called action, she became Barbara. But when the camera stopped, there were nights she would sit alone in her dressing room and feel completely lost. There was no training for that kind of pressure. She was still a teenager, barely trying to understand who she was, while the world had already decided for her. When Bonnie Franklin sent her to therapy, it opened a door, but it didn't make the pressure disappear. Therapy gave Valerie a way to talk about things she had buried. But when she left the therapist's office and stepped back onto the soundstage or saw herself on the cover of a magazine, reality came rushing back. At 15, she had been celebrated as the adorable girl next door. But as she grew older, the industry didn't adjust with her. It judged her more. People didn't just talk about her acting anymore. They talked about her body, about her weight, about how she looked next to co-stars. It wasn't just behind her back either. Headlines ran with it, and strangers thought they had a right to say whatever they wanted. She started hearing those voices louder than her own. Producers hinted at dieting. Wardrobe fittings became uncomfortable. Photographers asked her to angle this way or pull it in. At first, she smiled through it, but inside, something shifted. That same pressure she felt to perform in front of the camera now extended to every inch of her appearance. She began to believe that being liked meant being thinner, that being accepted meant being smaller. And when she couldn't meet those standards, she blamed herself. Food turned into something else. It wasn't just fuel anymore. It became comfort. It became a way to cope after a long day or silence the shame when a tabloid used her photo for laughs. She didn't always eat because she was hungry. Sometimes she ate because she was exhausted, because she was lonely, because it was one of the few things in her world she could still control, at least in that moment. She wouldn't talk about it for a long time. Not in interviews, not with friends, not even in therapy. Because when you're in the spotlight, there's this unspoken rule that you should just be grateful, that struggling with something as small as your weight isn't a real problem. But for Valerie, it was tied to her identity, her confidence, and her sense of worth. She didn't choose to make food the issue. The industry helped create that link. And once it was there, it was hard to untangle. This wasn't about vanity. It was about survival. And it would take years before she could name it for what it was: food addiction. Not a lack of discipline, not laziness, it was addiction. And if you think that was the end of her challenges, keep watching, because what came next was just as hard. 2 loves, 2 lessons. Valerie married Eddie Van Halen on April 11th, 1981. She was 21, he was 26, and already a world-famous guitarist. Their wedding was full of flowers, guests, and music. But more than anything, it was full of hope. Valerie believed in the marriage. She wasn't naive about Eddie's lifestyle, but she thought love could help settle him. In the beginning, they were inseparable. They laughed, traveled, and tried to keep their relationship sacred, far from the eyes of the public. But it didn't take long before the weight of Eddie's world began to pull her in. He was struggling with substance abuse, addictions he had long before their vows. Valerie tried to overlook the signs. She convinced herself that it was part of the rock and roll life, something he would grow out of. But the truth was much harder. Being married to a man struggling with substance abuse meant learning how to live in constant uncertainty. On some days, Eddie would disappear emotionally, lost in his own patterns. Valerie didn't grow up with that kind of chaos. She had always clung to structure, to peace. Now she was trying to manage a life where peace was never promised. She stopped talking to friends about it because most didn't understand. She carried the confusion in silence. Then, in 1991, she gave birth to their son, Wolfgang. Everything inside her shifted. Holding that baby made her feel responsible in a deeper way. It wasn't just about protecting herself anymore. She had to protect her child. Valerie tried to bring more order to their lives. She focused on parenting, created routines, and encouraged Eddie to find his way back. But addiction does not vanish just because someone needs you. As Wolfgang grew, so did the strain in their marriage. Valerie continued to support Eddie, but she was also losing herself. The love never left, but it changed. It became quieter, heavier. By 2001, they separated. It was not bitter, it was necessary. They finalized the divorce in 2007, but even after that, they stayed in touch. They shared parenting and memories that never really faded. When Eddie was diagnosed with cancer, Valerie was there. She spent time with him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She helped Wolfgang through the illness, knowing how hard it was to watch someone you love fade. In 2020, when Eddie passed away, she sat by his side. She was no longer his wife, but she had never stopped being part of his life. Their love was messy. It was painful, but it was real. But before then, not long after her separation from Eddie, Valerie crossed paths with someone new. She met Tom Vitale in 2004 through her brother. He was a financial planner, smart, steady, and different from the world she had known. At the time, she was still adjusting to life after Eddie. She wasn't looking for love, but something about Tom felt easy. They connected over simple things. He made her laugh. He gave off a calm energy that made her believe she could have a fresh start. 6 years later, in 2011, they got married in a small ceremony. Her son Wolfgang walked her down the aisle. For a while, Valerie thought she had found peace. Tom seemed to care deeply about her well-being. He even helped her manage certain parts of her life that felt overwhelming. But as the months turned into years, she started to notice a shift. He was no longer just helpful. He became controlling in subtle ways. At first, she ignored it, thinking maybe she was just sensitive, but it kept growing. She found herself shrinking again, doubting her decisions and keeping quiet when she should have spoken. She was no stranger to emotional pain, but this time it felt confusing because it came from someone she had let in during her most vulnerable moment. The marriage became a quiet battle. Valerie still smiled for cameras, still gave warm interviews, but behind closed doors, she was exhausted. She kept trying to make it work, convincing herself that maybe it was just a phase. Maybe she was just hard to live with. But over time, she couldn't deny the truth. She was living in a space that didn't feel safe emotionally, and that broke her more than she expected. In 2021, she filed for legal separation. It wasn't a clean break. There were arguments, court filings, and a drawn-out process that drained her emotionally. She never imagined herself in that place again, having to fight for the right to breathe freely. But this time, she didn't wait for things to break completely. She made the choice to leave before she lost herself completely. Valerie thought she had healed enough to find love again. She thought she could trust this chapter to be different. Instead, it gave her a new lesson in boundaries, self-respect, and walking away, even when it hurts. Keep watching, there's more. The cost of fame and the path to healing. Some things about fame don't get easier with time. If anything, they get heavier. Valerie had spent years trying to live a quieter, more intentional life after her second divorce. But when you've been in the public eye since you were 15, it's hard to disappear. Cameras still followed her. Headlines still spun stories. Every personal decision became public property, and the pressure to stay polished, composed, and agreeable hadn't gone away. When the opportunity to join the reboot of One Day at a Time came, it should have felt like a full-circle moment. Valerie had grown up on that set. That show was part of her DNA. But when the call came, she turned it down. At the time, the timing wasn't right. Emotionally, she wasn't ready. She was overwhelmed by personal matters and couldn't imagine stepping back into something that once held so much weight. Still, watching the show move forward without her stirred something unexpected. It wasn't jealousy, it was grief. She realized, too late, that the chance to reconnect with that version of herself had quietly slipped away. Healing didn't come in a flash for Valerie either. It came in pieces, small, quiet moments, hard decisions, private breakdowns, and finally, truth. After everything, she decided she was done living for other people's expectations. That decision didn't change her overnight, but it gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: control over her own story. Her books, especially Enough Already and Losing It, weren't written to entertain. They were her way of getting honest with herself and with everyone else. In those pages, she wrote plainly, without trying to sound wise or perfect. She talked about learning to stop apologizing for her pain, about finally understanding that worth isn't something you earn by pleasing people. It's something you decide for yourself. Professionally, she still creates, but on her terms. She chooses projects that bring her joy, not just visibility. She writes, she cooks, she speaks, but never in a way that costs her sense of self. Emotionally, she surrounds herself with people who respect her truth. No more roles to play, no more damage to undo for someone else's comfort. There are days that still feel heavy, but they don't crush her anymore, because now Valerie knows the difference between surviving and living. And maybe that's the most powerful thing about her story. She didn't just make it through. She finally made it home to herself. What do you think about Valerie Bertinelli's journey? Do you think she's finally found peace after everything she's been through? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen.